Why it would suck to wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper. Hey there friends, and welcome back to Realm Lore Mops, your place for deep dives into the twisted, the epic, and the wonderfully bizarre corners of the mortal realms. If you love getting lost in grimdark lore served with a splash of dry humor, you're in the right place. And hey, if you enjoy this kind of content, feel free to hit like and subscribe, but only if it genuinely makes your bones tingle in a good way. No pressure from Nagash here. And while you're at it, let us know in the comments what you're working on these days. Any painting projects, conversions, or scratch-built monstrosities on your hobby table. We'd love to hear what mortal creations are keeping your mortal fingers busy. Now, imagine waking up one day and realizing you don't actually have flesh anymore, or blood, or, organs. Instead, you're an elaborate jigsaw puzzle of borrowed bones, stitched together by a cabal of obsessive necromantic architects. Your memories are someone else's. Your body parts used to belong to a dozen other people, some of whom didn't die all that long ago. And to top it all off, your entire purpose in existence is collecting bones from terrified mortals, like some sort of skeletal taxman, all because a certain skeletal god king thinks he deserves to own the entire cosmos. Congratulations, you're now an Ossiarch Bonereaper, or, as you're about to find out, one of the worst existential nightmares in all of the mortal realms. So, why would it suck to wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper? Let's get into it. It all starts because Nagash doesn't do things halfway. He doesn't settle for merely raising armies of zombies or summoning clouds of ghosts. Oh no, Nagash wants order. He wants control. He wants a military machine so perfect that even Sigmar himself would weep in admiration or in mortal terror. The Ossiarch Bonereapers were born out of this vision, or, depending on your perspective, out of Nagash's monumental, skull-obsessed ego. See, Nagash looked around the mortal realms and decided that all those other undead, zombies, skeletons, ghouls, were sloppy, imperfect, disposable. They fell apart in battle, required constant magical prodding to stay upright and, most annoyingly, they lacked initiative. So Nagash concocted a plan. Why not build an army that was not merely dead, but dead and intelligent? An army that would march with perfect discipline, execute orders flawlessly, and maintain itself without constant magical micromanagement. And because he's Nagash, the sort of guy who sees a skull and wonders how he could make it even more skull-shaped, he decided to build this army from bones, lots and lots of bones. But bones alone weren't enough. So he blended them with souls, countless stolen spirits harvested from battlefields, slaughtered cities, and unfortunate mortals who simply happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. These souls weren't merely bound into individual bone reapers at random. Oh no. The Mortisans, Nagash's necromantic engineers, sorted them like a twisted filing system. Useful martial memories went into warriors. Brilliant strategic minds went into commanders. Cunning memories of trade, politics, and negotiation were reserved for the envoys and tithe collectors. The result was an army of beings who were not only physically resilient, but carried the knowledge, experiences, and instincts of thousands upon thousands of mortal lifetimes. Except there's a catch. Being an Ossiarch Bonereaper doesn't mean you get to enjoy those memories like a cozy scrapbook. They're fractured, blended, and repurposed. You might wake up one morning convinced you used to be a master stonemason from Hammerhall, only to find that half your mind insists you were once a Duardin pirate sailing the Charwind coast. Your sense of self? Completely shredded. Your identity is basically a necromantic patchwork quilt. So if you wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper, prepare to spend eternity wondering which bits of your personality actually belong to you, and which belong to the terrified woman whose skull is now forming your sternum. The Mortisans themselves are the true masterminds behind this process. These are not mere necromancers raising zombies out of shallow graves. No, these are artists, craftsmen, sculptors. Except instead of clay, they work with femurs and skulls. Instead of oil paint, they use soul energy harvested from the screaming dead. In their dark workshops, the ossifactorums, mortisans labor endlessly, constructing new Bonereapers piece by piece. Ribs are selected for curve and symmetry. Skulls are measured for perfect proportion. Arm and leg bones are cut, filed, and fit like components in a mortise and tenon joint. Imagine being one of those creations. Knowing that your ribcage was chosen because it provided precisely the right weight balance for swinging a naderite blade. Or that your jawbone was picked because it made you look sufficiently intimidating while shouting tax demands at mortals. But it's not just about aesthetics. Every piece of a Bonereaper's body serves a purpose. Bones are inscribed with necromantic runes designed to channel Nagash's will. Sockets and joints are crafted to endure centuries of ceaseless marching. Plates of ossified armor are fused directly into your skeleton, making you both warrior and walking fortress. And that's just your physical shell. Your consciousness, such as it is a composite of souls forcibly stitched together, bound by layers of necromantic coding. That coding ensures loyalty. It dictates your behavior. It makes sure that no matter how many flickers of past lives bubble up from your stolen memories, you will always serve Nagash's grand design. And here's where it really starts to suck. Because even though you're built for obedience, you're still aware. You're not a mindless skeleton or a shambling zombie. You can think, you can strategize. You can appreciate art, philosophy, the taste of mortal fear. But you're also completely trapped. Every thought you have is ultimately subject to the will of the supreme lord of undeath. And Nagash? He's not exactly big on free will. So even if you find yourself wondering whether the bone tithe is a touch excessive, or whether maybe mortals deserve a break from endless harvests, those thoughts get crushed beneath the iron weight of necromantic programming. In other words, you're fully sentient but utterly enslaved. And it doesn't help that you look terrifying. Bonereapers are crafted to be objects of dread. Their bodies are sculpted into exaggerated anatomical perfection. High, elegant skulls, elongated limbs, rib cages shaped into ornate armor. Their faces are masks of bone, often set in a permanent grimace or sneer. Even among Nagash's legions, Bonereapers stand apart. Zombies and skeletons stumble around drooling blood or clacking mindlessly. Bonereapers stride forward in perfect unison, silent and regal, their boneplate armor gleaming like polished ivory. Mortals don't just fear Bonereapers, they hate them. Because when a Bonereaper army appears on the horizon, it doesn't just mean death, it means the bone tithe is about to be collected. And oh, the bone tithe. Nothing sums up why it would suck to wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper quite like the bone tithe. Because, in Nagash's new order, every living being owes a debt to death. Every city, every settlement, every tribal encampment, they're all obligated to pay a portion of their bones to the Ossiarch Bonereapers. At first, it's not necessarily entire people. The bone tithe can start small, a few skulls from the catacombs, a collection of ribs from old battlefields, bones from plague pits. But if the tithe isn't met in full, and let's be real, it almost never is, the Bonereapers simply take what they're owed, and they're terrifyingly polite about it. Bonereaper envoys arrive in mortal settlements with flawless posture and perfect diction. They explain the exact weight and type of bones required, citing necromantic lore as if they're reading a trade agreement. But should the mortals refuse? Well, that's when Bonereapers unleash the wrath of a disciplined military machine designed specifically to harvest the living for spare parts. Picture yourself as a Bonereaper envoy. You step into a city square, your elongated skull mask gleaming in the sun. Mortals cower as you unfurl a parchment detailing how many skulls, femurs, and tibias must be delivered by the next moon. And when the terrified mayor of the town trembles and says, "We can't possibly meet that demand," you calmly reply, "Failure to meet the bone. Tithe is punishable by immediate extraction." And as a Bonereaper, that's your daily grind. Your job is to count bones, collect bones, and, if necessary, forcibly extract bones. All while maintaining perfect discipline and the regal bearing of Nagash's ultimate soldiers. Imagine the psychological toll. 1 minute, you're performing advanced arithmetic to tally up a settlement's bone tithe payments. The next, you're hacking terrified villagers to pieces because your superiors calculated you're short by 65 femurs and 17 skulls. And you're expected to do it all without question, because that's what Nagash demands. So waking up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper isn't just about being dead, but not dead. It's about being trapped in a system where your entire purpose is collecting the raw materials for more soldiers like yourself, or for grand necromantic constructs that your God King dreams of building. And there's no escape. Because even if deep inside some spark of your original soul rebels against the horror, Nagash will always win. But let's talk a bit more about what it's actually like to exist as one of Nagash's bone constructs. Because waking up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper doesn't just mean accepting your place in a cosmic tax-collecting army, it also means discovering that your own body is, well, horrifyingly bespoke. You see, the Mortisans don't simply build Bonereapers out of any random pile of bones. No, they select each piece with precise intention, almost like a deranged chef choosing the finest ingredients for a meal that just happens to walk and talk. Your arm bones might have come from a mighty ogre warrior, giving you tremendous strength. Your thigh bones, perhaps from a towering Stormcast Eternal who fell in battle. Your ribs might once have belonged to a dozen different mortals, soldiers, peasants, priests, their identities now erased, but their remains meticulously reshaped into the perfect curvature to support your armored breastplate. And your skull? That's where things get extra weird. Bonereaper skulls are sometimes crafted from a single, perfect specimen. Other times, they're hybrid constructs, with pieces from multiple crania fused into a single, elongated mask. It's not just practical, it's psychological warfare. A Bonereaper's face is designed to unsettle mortals, to look inhuman, alien, elegant, and utterly merciless. So imagine being conscious and aware, realizing that the face you show the world is literally an artistic sculpture made of people who screamed their last breath on a battlefield. And here's another delightful detail. Bonereaper bodies aren't purely physical. Each bone is layered in necromantic sigils, filigree runes, and soul-binding glyphs. Those markings glow faintly in the dark, pulsing with ethereal light whenever you channel your power. But there's a price to that arcane craftsmanship. Because your entire body is essentially a necromantic machine, your joints don't ache like flesh and sinew, but they still require maintenance. Mortisans must file, polish, and realign your bonework to keep you in perfect marching condition. Your soul energy needs periodic tuning to ensure stability. Otherwise, fragments of other personalities trapped inside you might start leaking through at awkward moments. Your voice, which resonates from hollow bone cavities, must be adjusted to produce the right pitch of authoritative terror. There's no such thing as a casual morning stretch for an Ossiarch Bonereaper. Every motion you make is measured, precise, and slightly eerie. Which brings us to your mind. Because if you wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper, your thoughts aren't entirely your own. You're not mindless. Far from it. In fact, the Bonereapers are known for razor-sharp discipline and brilliant strategic thinking. Nagash wanted warriors who could analyze battlefields, read enemy movements, and make split-second decisions without waiting for his direct orders. So your brain is like a constantly running logic engine. You're calculating distances, estimating enemy morale, gauging the structural integrity of fortifications, and silently evaluating every mortal's skeletal worth. But interwoven into those calculations are countless voices, echoes of the many souls whose memories were fused to create you. One moment, you might find yourself reciting the tactical doctrines of an ancient Free Guild general. The next, you're flashing back to the final prayers of a Dawnbringer priestess whose skull now forms the back of your helmet. It's all there, mixed together into a single, swirling psychic soup. And that psychic chaos is always bubbling just under the surface. Because sometimes, fragments of emotion or memory push through the necromantic bindings. You might suddenly remember what it felt like to hug a child, except you've never had children. Or recall the taste of honeyed mead, though your current form doesn't even have a tongue. It's an endless psychological tug of war. On one side, perfect obedience to Nagash. On the other, flickering remnants of dozens of past lives, each screaming to be remembered. Which, I'm sure you'll agree, sounds like a fabulous way to start your eternal existence. Because as a Bonereaper, you're not just a soldier, you're part of Nagash's grand vision for a perfect society. The Ossiarch Bonereapers see themselves as builders of a new world order. They believe the mortal realms are chaotic, wasteful, and doomed to failure without the guiding hand of death. In their eyes, mortals are messy creatures prone to self-destruction, greed, and rebellion. Left unchecked, they'll eventually squander everything and leave only ashes behind. So the Bonereapers have set out to impose what they consider to be true order. Why strict laws? Regulated societies? Why perfect military discipline? And, of course, the bone tithe to maintain Nagash's grand designs. In their minds, this isn't cruelty, it's salvation. But here's the rub. Bonereapers are utterly humorless. They can recite pages of necromantic philosophy without blinking, but they don't understand jokes, laughter, or irony. To them, the bone tithe isn't horrific, it's a rational economic policy. Imagine telling a Bonereaper that collecting 1,000 skulls from a village might be seen as excessive. He'll look at you, his elongated bone face blank and serene, and calmly reply, 1,000 skulls are a modest investment in the stability of Nagash's perfect empire. There's no empathy, no flexibility. Everything is dictated by efficiency and logic, which makes negotiating with Bonereapers one of the most terrifying experiences in the mortal realms. Because they don't negotiate, they dictate. And if a mortal ruler tries to plead for mercy, offering gold, crops, or labor instead of bones, the Bonereapers simply blink their hollow eye sockets and reply, bones are eternal. Gold is not. So if you wake up as a Bonereaper, you're not just a tax collector, you're the face of a necromantic totalitarian state that views living beings as a renewable resource. And speaking of resources, let's talk about the true cost of maintaining the Bonereaper's empire, because the bone tithe isn't just about stockpiling bones for fun. Those bones are raw material for construction. Mortisans carve fortifications from femurs and skulls. They shape bridges, towers, and entire necropolises out of calcified remains. Even weapons and armor are crafted from sculpted bone reinforced with necromantic energy. If a settlement refuses the bone tithe, the Bonereapers don't just kill the citizens out of spite. They kill them because they need their bones to build walls, forge armor, and reinforce their relentless legions. So, as a Bonereaper, your very body might one day be recycled into a fortress wall or a piece of siege equipment. Talk about job insecurity. And then there's the soul aspect. Because it's not just bones the Bonereapers harvest, it's souls too. Mortisans siphon spiritual energy from the dead to empower new constructs or sustain massive necromantic rituals. Your existence as a Bonereaper is fueled by a battery of stolen souls, all screaming in the darkness inside you. You might even feel those souls sometimes. A whisper in the back of your mind, a sob in your chest cavity, a flash of mortal terror leaking through your mental defenses. And Nagash doesn't see this as monstrous. To him, it's simply resource management, efficiency, order. So if you wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper, congratulations, your daily reality will be one of existential horror, forced obedience, and endless bone audits. Because in Nagash's empire, you are not an individual, you're an asset, a tool, a cog in a vast, skull-shaped machine. And if one day that machine decides you'd be more useful as a stair-step in a bone fortress, well, so be it. And the worst part, you'll agree. Because your necromantic programming won't let you think otherwise. So yeah, that's why it would absolutely suck to wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper. So, if you wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper, you're not just a pile of bones in fancy armor. You're also a citizen of one of the strangest, strictest, and most rigid societies the mortal realms have ever known. And let me tell you, life in that society is about as much fun as gnawing on a dry femur. Because the Ossiarch Bonereapers have something that few other undead factions possess, an actual civilization. not just a mindless horde lurching forward in a tidal wave of decay, but a functioning empire built on structure, laws, ranks, and a deeply ingrained sense of purpose. And on paper that sounds impressive, right? Order, discipline, stability. But the reality is a nightmare of hierarchy, surveillance, and the constant pressure of living up to Nagash's impossible standards. First off, you quickly learn that every Bonereaper belongs somewhere in the grand design. You're either a leader, a laborer, a warrior, a collector, or a builder. There's no ambiguity. No room for improvisation. Your existence is preordained by the Mortisans who crafted you, and by the will of Nagash that pulses through every rune on your bones. At the very top of the pyramid stands the supreme lord of the Ossiarch Empire himself, Katakros, the Mortarch of the necropolis. If you were hoping for a friendly boss, you're out of luck. Katakros is brilliant, cunning, patient, and utterly merciless. He's the epitome of Nagash's ideals, a master strategist, sculpted from perfection, who views every situation as a problem to be solved, no matter how many mortals have to die in the process. Katakros doesn't tolerate weakness, he doesn't tolerate disobedience, he barely tolerates individuality. If you're lucky, he won't even know you exist. If you're unlucky, you'll find yourself standing in front of him, trying to explain why your detachment failed to collect the appropriate number of skulls from a minor city-state in Shyish. And that's the thing, as an Ossiarch Bonereaper, you'd be perpetually judged, not just by your commanders, but by the very ideology of your entire society. Every action you take is measured for efficiency and loyalty. Every decision you make is scrutinized under the cold light of Nagash's perfect order. Below Katakros are the various lieutenants and commanders, each as cold and implacable as carved obsidian. Take Xantos, the so-called Grave of Heroes, a terrifying figure who delights in crushing mortal resistance and executing Nagash's enemies with methodical precision. He's a warrior's warrior, forged from the spirits of ancient conquerors, and he views mercy as a dangerous form of inefficiency. Then you've got the Kavalos Lords, the mounted elite of the Bonereapers. These towering warriors ride skeletal steeds forged from monstrous bones, their faces hidden behind elaborate skull helms, their weapons crafted to be both symbols of authority and instruments of mass slaughter. If you wake up as one of them, congratulations. You get to spend eternity charging into enemy lines like a bone-plated battering ram, executing complex maneuvers while maintaining an air of arrogant disdain. And then, of course, there are the Mortisans themselves, the true architects of Ossiarch society. These necromantic artisans view themselves as sculptors of perfection. They create the Bonereapers, repair them, improve upon them, and experiment constantly with new designs. Some Mortisans are obsessed with efficiency and symmetry. Others are borderline sadistic, delighting in crafting constructs specifically designed to terrify mortals. Either way, they hold incredible power. Because in Ossiarch society, the Mortisans are both your creators and your overseers. They decide how you're assembled, what skills are implanted into your consciousness, and what modifications you receive over the centuries. If a Mortisan decides your femur would serve better as a piece of architecture in the next necropolis, well, guess what's getting yanked out of your thigh? And as for the rank-and-file Bonereapers, the Mortek Guard make up the backbone of the armies. These are the infantry soldiers, disciplined, silent, endlessly patient. They march in perfect phalanxes, shields interlocked, naderite blades gleaming like polished ivory. And while they lack the individual flair of higher-ranking constructs, they're still formidable warriors, each carrying fragments of countless lifetimes' worth of combat experience. But even among the Mortek Guard, there's no such thing as camaraderie. No jokes, no gossip, no secret dice games behind the ossuary walls. Each Bonereaper is focused entirely on the task at hand, driven by the psychic compulsion to serve Nagash's will without question. It's a society built entirely on duty and fear. There's no space for personal ambition, only the desire to serve more perfectly. Every Bonereaper wants to embody the ideal of Nagash's order, because any deviation is ruthlessly corrected. The punishment for failure can be as simple as disassembly, or as elaborate as having your essence siphoned out to empower a new construct. And there's another layer to the Ossiarch hierarchy that makes it especially nightmarish: the constant surveillance. Mortisans and higher-ranking commanders are perpetually monitoring lower-ranked constructs for signs of error, inefficiency, or creeping individuality. If you're caught displaying a spark of independent thought like feeling pity for mortal victims or questioning Nagash's decrees, your memories might be forcibly purged or your soul fragments reassigned. So if you wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper, expect to live in a world where privacy doesn't exist, where your every thought and gesture could be analyzed for hidden subversion. You're not just property, you're a living machine constantly audited for perfect loyalty. And you might think, well, at least I'd be safe from the chaos of mortal life, right? Not so fast. Because there's another fundamental truth about Ossiarch society: it is always at war. Nagash demands the expansion of his empire. He demands new bones, new souls, new territory. And that means the Bonereapers are perpetually marching into hostile lands, toppling cities, crushing resistance, and harvesting the fallen for the next wave of necromantic construction. But before we talk about war, let's talk about something equally terrifying: the philosophy that drives it all. Because if you wake up as a Bonereaper, you're not just a soldier. You're part of a civilization that believes, with absolute certainty, that it's saving the mortal realms. The Bonereapers see themselves as agents of order in a universe gone mad. From their perspective, mortals are chaotic, self-destructive creatures who squander resources and constantly wage pointless wars. Chaos, destruction, even the cities of Sigmar, they're all flawed, temporary solutions to the cosmic problem of existence. Nagash, in their eyes, offers the only true salvation: undeath. Perpetuity. No more hunger, no more disease, no more decay, just the eternal certainty of perfect control. Bonereapers genuinely believe they're creating a better world, one bone at a time. So as a Bonereaper, you'd find yourself endlessly repeating the mantras of Nagash's philosophy. You'd be programmed to view the bone tithe not as an atrocity, but as a necessary civic duty. In your mind, every skull you collect is another brick in the foundation of Nagash's perfect empire, a place where suffering has been mathematically eliminated because no one truly lives anymore. But deep inside, in the quiet moments when the necromantic bindings loosen just enough for your stolen memories to whisper, you might wonder if it's all worth it. Is eternal order truly salvation if it requires endless death? Do mortals deserve the chance to make their own mistakes, even if it leads to chaos? And that's where the existential crisis hits. Because even though your mind is conditioned for absolute loyalty, the fragments of your past lives still linger, sometimes rising up in moments of crushing doubt. You might remember the warm sun on your face as a mortal, the laughter of friends, the taste of bread fresh from the oven. And then you look down at your ivory-plated ribcage, your taloned fingers, your skull mask with its empty eye sockets, and you realize those days are gone. Yet no matter how loud that inner voice becomes, the programming always wins. You can think fleeting thoughts of freedom, but you'll never act on them, because your mind is hardwired to serve. So waking up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper means living in a society that is both terrifyingly efficient and utterly soul-crushing. You'd be surrounded by beings who look just like you, yet there'd be no comfort, no friendship, no warmth, just endless marching, endless duty, and the knowledge that you're merely one piece in a vast necromantic puzzle that stretches across realms and centuries. And if that sounds bad, wait until you hear about what happens when Nagash decides it's time to expand his empire. Because, as an Ossiarch Bonereaper, war isn't just something you might do someday, it's the reason you exist. Your entire body has been crafted for battle. Your limbs are shaped for balance and striking angles. Your armor is fused directly into your bones, making you both shield and weapon. Your mind is a map of strategies drilled into you through centuries of implanted memories. And the Ossiarchs don't just fight, they fight with perfect discipline. Picture an army of bone constructs marching in phalanxes, shields interlocked, moving in absolute unison, not a single step out of place, not a single war cry shouted in spontaneous fury. The battlefield is a chessboard, and every Bonereaper is a piece moving precisely where the Mortisans intend. But behind that discipline lies unrelenting brutality. Because Bonereapers are not simply soldiers, they're harvesters. Their battles always serve two purposes: victory and resource acquisition. When an Ossiarch army wins, they don't just claim territory. They systematically strip the battlefield of the dead, harvesting bones, collecting skulls, and siphoning souls for future necromantic projects. Even the weapons of Bonereapers are designed for this dual purpose. A Narratorite blade can cleave through armor as easily as it severs a spine, ensuring a clean harvest of skeletal components. And if you think that sounds efficient, you'd be right. Horrifyingly so. Because to a Bonereaper, there's no difference between a slain enemy and a bag of construction materials. Both are simply resources waiting to be collected and catalogued. So if you wake up as a Bonereaper, your entire existence will revolve around perfecting the art of slaughter, not out of hatred or rage, but because it's simply your duty. And that, my friend, is why it would absolutely suck to wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper. So let's talk about one of the most defining and possibly the most soul-crushing parts of waking up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper, the bone tithe. Because as bad as it is to be a patchwork creature of bones and trapped souls, it's arguably worse that your day job is collecting taxes in bones. See, mortals everywhere know the Ossiarch Bonereapers are coming long before the Ivory Legions appear on the horizon. Rumors spread like wildfire. Bells toll. Councils gather in panicked chambers. Because everyone knows what happens next, the arrival of the tithe demands. Bonereapers do not just invade randomly. Despite how terrifying they look, they operate with a chilling sense of legalism. They appear at the gates of a mortal city with bone-clad envoys, each a towering construct carved to inspire both awe and fear. They carry parchment scrolls longer than a man is tall, sealed with Nagash's sigils, listing in excruciating detail exactly how many bones are owed. Imagine standing in a city plaza as a Bonereaper envoy reads from one of these decrees in a voice as hollow as wind blowing through a crypt. The crowd shudders as he calmly recites, 1,267 femurs, 890 skulls, 778 rib bones, 496 assorted bones from upper limbs to be delivered by the next full moon. No appeals process. The bone tithe is law because Nagash declared it so. And that's the horrifying part. From the Bonereaper's point of view, this isn't cruelty, it's simply economics. They need bones for everything. Bones for new soldiers. Bones to build fortresses, walls, towers, and bridges. Bones to reinforce their weapons and armor. Bones for intricate mortuary constructions to honor Nagash. In the Bonereapers' minds, mortals should be grateful for the opportunity to contribute to this grand necrotic civilization. The Bonereapers even view the bone tithe as merciful. After all, they're giving mortals the chance to pay in advance, rather than simply slaughtering them outright. But here's why it truly sucks to be a Bonereaper, because you are the one who has to enforce it. As a Bonereaper, you might find yourself standing in front of trembling mortals, calmly explaining that their local catacombs do not contain sufficient skulls to satisfy the current fiscal quarter's quota. You might even offer helpful suggestions, like raising the local graveyard, or executing a few dozen citizens to fill the shortfall. And when the terrified mayor insists that they simply can't spare any more bones without dooming their city's survival, you'll look into their tear-streaked eyes and say, with cold certainty, the debt will be collected, living or dead. Because if the bone tithe isn't met in full, the Bonereapers do not simply walk away. They take what they're owed. And here's where your existence becomes both morally and existentially unbearable. Because the Bonereapers don't hate mortals. They don't rage with bloodlust or cackle with delight. They are utterly indifferent. Their mass slaughter is performed with the clinical precision of a bureaucrat balancing a spreadsheet. Picture entire detachments of Mortek guards sweeping through a settlement, cutting down mortals with practiced efficiency. Even as they fight, they're cataloguing the yield. This one has strong femurs. That one's skull will serve well as a helmet crest. Those rib bones are ideal for shield reinforcement. Every corpse becomes inventory, and if you wake up as a Bonereaper, that's what you'd be thinking about as you swing your Naderite blade into mortal flesh. You wouldn't feel hatred or guilt. You'd feel the faint irritation of administrative inconvenience, as if your tally didn't quite match the quota, and now you'll have to stay late processing paperwork. Because here's another secret. The Bone Tithe isn't just a military campaign, it's also logistics. Every harvested bone is measured, sorted, tagged, and transported back to Ossiarch necropolises. Mortisans keep records so precise they could shame the most meticulous accountants in the Free Guild. Each bone is assigned a tracking sigil to ensure it's used appropriately, whether in constructing a new Bonereaper or in building the arch of a necropolis gate. So if you wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper, congratulations, you're part tax collector, part supply chain analyst, and part field executioner. But it gets even worse. Because sometimes mortals try to negotiate. It's almost endearing, really. Cities offer gold, gems, food, livestock, anything except bones. The Bonereapers will stand there silently, listening to desperate mortals plead and beg, and then answer, bones are eternal, gold is not. Gold cannot be carved into spear shafts. Grain cannot be fashioned into battlements. Bones, however, are the universal currency of Nagash's empire, so mortals inevitably fail to meet the tithe. And then the slaughter begins. But the Bonereapers don't view this as cruelty. In their eyes, they're simply collecting overdue payments. The bloodshed is an unfortunate but logical outcome of mortal non-compliance. And that's why it's hellish to wake up as a Bonereaper. Because you're not just a soldier, you're the enforcer of a cosmic business plan. You're the representative of an empire whose entire economy is built on dismemberment and soul harvesting. Even when mortals weep and beg for mercy, you'll feel only the cold certainty that the bone tithe must be fulfilled. Because in Nagash's mind, bones aren't just bones. They're the bricks of a perfect future. And if you think that's bad, wait until you hear about the battlefield life of a Bonereaper. Because being a Bonereaper doesn't mean you only collect bones. It also means you're built for war. And not just any war as an art form, executed with supernatural precision. Bonereaper armies don't charge forward in ragged mobs. They advance like a single organism, marching in lockstep, shields raised, weapons poised. Their formations are so disciplined that entire phalanxes can pivot on a single bone heel turn, presenting walls of spears to incoming cavalry. It's beautiful. It's terrifying. And if you wake up as one of them, it's your life forever. Let's start with your weaponry. The Bonereaper's primary weapon is the Naderite blade, forged from enchanted bone and infused with necromantic energies. These blades aren't merely sharp, they learn. Every time a Naderite weapon strikes flesh, it remembers the vibrations, the weaknesses in enemy armor, the density of bone. Over time, the blade becomes more efficient, more lethal, adapting to kill with ever greater ease. So if you wake up as a Bonereaper warrior, congratulations, your sword is smarter than most mortals. But there's a dark side to that technology, because the Naderite's memory is fueled by fragments of soul energy. Every strike siphons away a sliver of life essence, storing it as raw power, which means you're basically swinging around a sentient bone computer that feeds on souls. And that's just your standard gear. Some Bonereapers wield Naderite spears, ideal for the disciplined phalanx formations. Others carry Naderite clubs capable of shattering shields with sheer impact. The more tech-crawler artillery constructs fire volleys of screaming skulls that explode into necromantic shrapnel. Then there are the terrifying necropolis stalkers, Bonereapers assembled from 4 different personalities, each grafted into a single monstrous form. At any moment, a necropolis stalker can shift between martial stances, channeling the fighting styles of warriors from 4 different eras and cultures. Imagine waking up as one of them. You'd have voices in your head arguing over which way to swing your weapons, each voice convinced it knows the perfect method of murder. And that's the elegant horror of Bonereaper warfare. Every construct is tailored for a specific role, each a masterpiece of necromantic engineering. Even the massive Gothizar harvesters have a dark brilliance. These towering constructs prowl the battlefield, ripping the bones from the fallen and instantly repurposing them, either by consuming them for energy or adding them to nearby Bonereapers to repair damage mid-battle. Picture that, you're a Bonereaper fighting in the line. You take a blow that cracks your ribcage. The Goth is a harvester lumbers over, scoops up some bones from the ground and slaps them into your torso like a grim necromantic patch job. On paper, that's efficient. In practice, imagine the psychological trauma of having random bones jammed into your chest while you're still aware and functional. Because even though you're an undead construct, you can feel. You feel pain. You feel damage. You feel bones breaking inside you, even if your necromantic bindings force you to keep fighting regardless. So if you wake up as a Bonereaper, your combat life is a cycle of endless marching, perfect discipline, and utterly horrifying battlefield repairs. But the discipline goes deeper than formations and weapons. It's baked into your soul. Bonereapers don't panic, they don't scream, they don't even raise their voices. A Bonereaper army could be reduced to half its numbers, surrounded on all sides, flames roaring through their ranks, and they'd continue fighting in perfect silence, adjusting their formations with mechanical precision. Because fear doesn't exist for them, only duty. And that, ironically, is why it's so utterly miserable to wake up as one. Because even when you should feel terror, even when your existence is being chipped away bone by bone, you remain trapped in the cold logic of Nagash's programming. No relief, no adrenaline rush, no catharsis, just the endless grind of duty and obedience. And when the battle's over, guess what your reward is? More work. You'll spend hours cataloguing the bones of the dead, checking for quality, discarding shattered fragments, and delivering the rest back to the Mortisans for future use. Because in Nagash's empire, nothing is ever truly over. So if you wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper, prepare for a life where war is both your curse and your reason for existing. And that, my friend, is why it would absolutely suck to wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper. So let's talk about something that's somehow even creepier than being built out of recycled bones and forced to collect taxes in skulls. Let's talk about magic. Because if you wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper, you'd quickly discover that your entire existence is saturated with necromantic sorcery on a scale so immense it makes ordinary mortals shudder. See, the Ossiarch Bonereapers aren't just bone constructs animated by leftover spirit energy. They're masterpieces of arcane engineering, forged and sustained by rituals that have been perfected across entire ages of undeath. And the wizards responsible for all this are the Mortisans. Mortisans are not your average, cackling necromancers reanimating corpses in crumbling graveyards. They're far beyond that. These are artisans, scientists, and high priests rolled into one, working in vast laboratories called ossifactorums. There, they shape bones like clay and weave soul energy like silk, creating constructs of eerie perfection. Imagine walking into an ossifactorum as a Bonereaper and witnessing the Mortisans at work. Massive racks hang from the ceiling, each loaded with cleaned bones sorted by size and species. Pools of glowing spirit energy swirl across bone-carved channels in the floor. The air buzzes with chanting as Mortisans wave obsidian tools etched with necromantic runes, each flicker of motion carving new glyphs into skeletal fragments. Don't even get me started on the smell. It's a mix of scorched bone dust, ozone, and that faint psychic tang that always seems to cling to pure death magic. But here's where it sucks for you. Because as an Ossiarch Bonereaper, you're not just created in these places, you're maintained there too. Mortisans regularly inspect you, checking every runic line etched into your bone plates. They fine-tune the necromantic energy flowing through your joints. They scrape away calcification that might slow your movements. A tiny crack in your skull helm, or a misaligned rune on your ribcage. They won't hesitate to dismantle you entirely to reassemble you properly. Picture living every day knowing that if you twitch slightly the wrong way, some Mortisan might decide your femur works better as a piece of architectural trim in a necropolis wall. And that's just the physical side of it, because magic in Bonereaper society isn't merely maintenance, it's also power. Mortisans wield terrifying necromantic spells that can shatter enemy formations, drain the life from living creatures, or bolster their bone constructs with bursts of animating energy. During battles, Mortisans stand behind the Bonereaper phalanxes, raising staves crowned with bone iconography, chanting in voices that echo like coffin lids slamming shut. When they cast spells, the air grows cold enough to frost metal. Ghostly hands reach out from swirling clouds of bone dust. Wailing skulls materialize, screaming silently as they fly toward enemy lines. And as a Bonereaper, you're part of that ritual. You can feel the necromantic energy surge through your bones, strengthening your limbs and sharpening your senses. It's like being plugged into an endless reservoir of power. Except there's a catch. There's always a catch, because necromantic energy isn't infinite. It has to come from somewhere. And that somewhere is usually mortal souls. Mortisans harvest souls like crops. After a battle, they move among the corpses, using obsidian rods to siphon the last shreds of spirit from the dead and dying. That energy is then funneled back into the Bonereapers, fueling spells, empowering constructs, or forging new warriors. Which means that if you wake up as a Bonereaper, you're basically running on the stolen essence of terrified mortals who died screaming. And sometimes, fragments of those souls linger inside you. You might suddenly hear a mortal's voice weeping inside your skull, or feel emotions that aren't yours. A mother calling for her child. Gah, a warrior cursing his enemies with his last breath. A priest praying desperately to Sigmar for salvation. And no matter how loyal you are to Nagash, no matter how deeply your programming insists that the bone tithe is righteous, those echoes gnaw at your sanity. Because even an undead construct can only carry so many ghosts before cracks start to show. The Mortisans gift you power, but that power comes at the cost of your own inner peace, and it doesn't stop at spellcasting. Mortisans are also the inventors of some of the mortal realm's most monstrous war machines. Take the Gothiza Harvester we talked about earlier. It's not merely a battlefield medic, it's a living engine of soul-harvesting technology, crafted by Mortisans to scoop up corpses and strip them for usable components mid-fight. Or the Mortec Crawlers, towering bone artillery pieces that fling screaming skulls which detonate into clouds of necromantic energy. These creations are as much magical constructs as mechanical ones, animated by soul energy and loaded with malicious intelligence. So if you wake up as a Bonereaper, you'd be living alongside these monstrous creations daily, knowing that you could end up inside one of them if your performance ever slips. Because in the Ossiarch hierarchy, every piece is replaceable, including you. But let's leave the magical workshops for a moment and talk about something else that defines a Bonereaper's existence, how they deal with the rest of the mortal realms. Because despite being terrifying bone automatons, Bonereapers do interact with other factions, and if you wake up as one of them, that's going to be your social life, such as it is. First, let's talk about mortals from the cities of Sigmar. To them, the Bonereapers are not just enemies, their nightmares come to life. When mortals see ivory banners on the horizon, they know that diplomacy is over, and that they'll soon be negotiating how many of their own people have to die to meet this quarter's bone quota. Bonereapers try to be polite about it. They genuinely believe they're the civilized party in any negotiation. But their negotiation style amounts to presenting a bone ledger and giving the mortals until sundown to comply or else. So if you wake up as a Bonereaper, be prepared to spend a lot of time listening to mortals weep, plead, and promise anything except bones. And be equally prepared to kill them when they inevitably fail to deliver. Then there's the dynamic with chaos, and oh, it's complicated. On one hand, Nagash despises chaos. He sees the chaos gods as cosmic viruses infecting the mortal realms with unpredictability, mutation, and entropy. Bonereapers, therefore, are designed to be the ultimate counter to chaos, disciplined, incorruptible, and immune to the temptations of the dark gods. And yet, chaos finds Bonereapers fascinating. Siege in particular delights in attempting to sow doubt within Bonereaper ranks, whispering secrets into the psychic echoes swirling in their skulls. Imagine trying to maintain your perfect necromantic discipline while the Lord of Change bombards you with visions of alternative futures in which Nagash is overthrown and you become the master of death. Of course, your programming would crush those heretical thoughts almost instantly, but it would still leave you rattled. Bonereapers see chaos as filth to be purged. But they're also smart enough to know that fighting chaos is like trying to mop up the ocean. It never ends, and it always tries to drown you. Then we have the destruction factions. Aurochs, Ogres, Gits, the entire unruly horde. Bonereapers regard them as noisy, irrational, and utterly wasteful. After all, you can't collect a bone tithe from a rampaging Auroch warband that simply smashes everything and wanders off into the sunset. To Bonereapers, destruction factions are both an annoyance and a resource. When Ogres charge a city, the Bonereapers sometimes just wait for the Ogres to finish eating everyone, then swoop in to collect the leftover bones. Efficient, if somewhat grisly. Of course, destruction armies occasionally turn on Bonereapers, viewing them as tempting targets covered in shiny bone armor. And while Bonereapers often win those fights, there's always the risk that a particularly huge Maw Crucier or an entire stampede of Stonehorns might just trample an Ossiarch phalanx flat. So as a Bonereaper, you'd develop a deep-seated irritation with destruction factions, not because you hate them, but because they refuse to participate in orderly taxation. Then there's the rest of Death. You'd think Death factions would be best friends, but not quite. Bonereapers look down on flesh-eater courts as deluded lunatics. Ghouls and courtiers might think they're noble knights, but to Bonereapers, they're just deranged meat scrabblers whose bones are probably too tainted for proper architectural use. Nighthaunts, meanwhile, are regarded with a mixture of respect and wariness. Both factions serve Nagash, but the Nighthaunt process is far less precise. Bonereapers pride themselves on perfect engineering and rational thought. Nighthaunts are rage-fueled phantoms shrieking through walls and slashing at anything mortal. Efficient? Not exactly. So if you wake up as a Bonereaper, you'd spend eternity considering yourself superior to every other faction, even your fellow undead. Because in your eyes, no one else understands true order. And that's the root of the Bonereapers' greatest tragedy. Their utter, unwavering certainty that they alone can save the mortal realms, by turning them into a cold empire of bones and silence. They believe they're the heroes in this story, but no one else does. And if you wake up as one of them, you'd carry that righteous conviction while also knowing, deep down, that you're utterly alone. And that, my friend, is yet another reason why it would absolutely suck to wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper. So if you've woken up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper, we've covered your body, your mind, your grim job as the Bone Taxman, and how every living thing in the mortal realms either fears you, hates you, or both. But there's still one huge piece of the puzzle we haven't truly explored yet. The philosophy and religious undercurrent that drives the Ossiarch Bonereapers, and the enemies that spend every waking hour trying to grind your elaborate ivory bones into dust. Because one of the strangest, most unsettling things about waking up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper is discovering that you're not just part of an army, you're part of a faith. See, the Bonereapers don't simply serve Nagash because they're forced to. Okay, that's part of it. Nagash's necromantic bindings make sure you can't exactly become a free spirit and join the Sylvaneth in tree-hugging activities. But it goes deeper than that. The Ossiarch Bonereapers are true believers. They believe with unwavering certainty that Nagash is the rightful god of all creation. In their minds, Nagash isn't just the master of undeath. He's the cosmic solution to the chaos and suffering that has plagued the mortal realms since the Age of Myth. Mortals, in the Bonereapers' view, are pitifully fragile. They die from war, plague, famine, or simply time. Their societies collapse, their memories fade, and everything they build eventually crumbles into dust. Nagash, however, offers permanence, stability, a universe where nothing dies because everything is already dead, but in a good way as far as the Bonereapers are concerned. In Nagash's empire, there's no hunger, no disease, no uncertainty, just endless order and the steady rhythm of bones marching across silent plains. So when you wake up as a Bonereaper, your mind is filled not only with combat techniques and tax codes, but with philosophical certainty. You genuinely believe that every bone you collect is a step towards salvation, that every soul harvested, every fortress built from femurs is part of a righteous mission to impose the only true order the cosmos will ever know. But, and this is where it truly sucks, you're also aware enough to recognize that your faith comes with a cost. Deep down, some flicker of those mortal souls trapped inside you knows the truth, that Nagash's perfect order is bought at the price of endless death and enslavement. Sometimes, when you stand watch atop a necropolis wall, gazing out over lands bathed in gloom, memories surface, mortal memories, of laughter, family, freedom, or even just the simple pleasure of walking through a sunlit meadow without a skull helm bolted to your face. You feel the iron grip of Nagash's will squeezing the unwanted doubts from your mind. It's like being locked in a cell within your own consciousness. You're loyal because you have no choice, but also because part of you desperately wants to believe that Nagash's vision will finally bring an end to the mortal realms' endless suffering. So imagine trying to reconcile those two truths while also performing your daily duties as an undead tax collector, because that's the unique hell of being an Ossiarch Bonereaper. You're not just a monster, you're a monster who believes he's saving the world. But let's shift gears and talk about the other half of your existence, your enemies. Because if you wake up as a Bonereaper, one thing becomes very clear, very quickly. Everyone wants you dead. Start with the cities of Sigmar. To the humans, Duarden and Aelves who dwell in those bastions of civilization, the Bonereapers are the embodiment of everything terrifying about death. You're not like zombies or skeletons, mindlessly clawing at fortress walls. You're intelligent. You're organized, you send envoys to negotiate harvest quotas, and then you kill everyone anyway when they can't pay up. For mortals, there's something uniquely horrifying about an enemy who kills you, not out of rage or hatred, but because you simply didn't deliver enough bones to meet the quarterly tithe. So the cities of Sigmar muster armies whenever Bonereapers appear. Free Guild regiments line up in gleaming armor, cannons roar, battle mages hurl spells of fire and lightning. And still, the Bonereapers march forward, shields locked, expressions impassive behind skull masks. To fight the Bonereapers is to fight an enemy who feels no fear, no fatigue, no doubt. And that terrifies mortals more than any rotting zombie horde ever could. Then there's the Stormcast Eternals. If there's anyone who understands the curse of being reforged into something more than human, it's the Stormcast. But even they find the Bonereapers chilling. Stormcast see themselves as Sigmar's chosen, lifted from mortal ranks to become living symbols of hope. Bonereapers, on the other hand, are forged from death, loyal only to Nagash's cold vision of order. So whenever these two forces clash, it's more than just swords and hammers. It's a philosophical war. The Stormcast fight for freedom, faith, and mortal potential. The Bonereapers fight for total control and eternal undeath. If you wake up as a Bonereaper, expect to spend plenty of time facing gleaming warriors in thunderstrike armor, hurling celestial lightning and roaring Sigmar's name. And even if you manage to cut one down, there's no satisfaction because you know that Stormcast's soul will simply vanish in a bolt of blue lightning, destined to return to Azir to be reforged and come back for you later. The cycle is endless. But it's not just mortals and Stormcast who want you eradicated. Let's talk about chaos, because the followers of the Dark Gods despise the Bonereapers with a passion. Not because you're especially holy or pure, Nagash and his followers are hardly shining beacons of moral virtue. No, chaos hates the Bonereapers because they're an affront to chaos itself. Chaos thrives on change, mutation, and the unpredictable. The Bonereapers, meanwhile, embody perfect, eternal order. You're an army that never panics, never mutates, never succumbs to temptation. Your souls are so tightly bound by necromantic codes that even Tzeentch finds it maddening trying to slip in whispers of corruption. But that doesn't stop chaos from trying. Tzeentch loves to seed Bonereaper ranks with false visions, showing them alternate futures where Nagash is dethroned and the Bonereapers become free masters of the realms. Khorne simply wants to crush your perfectly drilled phalanxes under waves of blood-maddened berserkers. Nurgle, ever the cosmic recycler, dreams of infecting your pristine ivory bones with vile poxes that cause even necromantic constructs to rot. So if you wake up as a Bonereaper, you'll quickly learn that every battle against chaos is a struggle not just for territory, but for the very purity of your existence. Because one crack in your mental programming could send the entire Ossiarch Empire crashing down. Then there's the Sylvaneth. You wouldn't think that living trees would be mortal enemies of skeleton men. But oh, they are. The Sylvaneth look at the Bonereapers and see a horrifying perversion of nature. The Bonereapers harvest bones from every corner of the mortal realms, uprooting ancient graveyards and plundering sacred burial groves that the Sylvaneth consider holy. To the Sylvaneth, the Bonereapers are not just enemies, they're blasphemies walking the land. So if you wake up as a Bonereaper, expect to find yourself ambushed in shadowed glades by murderous treefolk wielding spears of living wood, vengeful dryads hissing curses in a language older than the realms themselves. And as a Bonereaper, you'd march into those battles utterly unfazed, because Nagash programmed you to see the Sylvaneth not as sacred beings, but as convenient sources of bones waiting to be harvested. But perhaps the most fascinating conflict you'd face as a Bonereaper is with other factions of death. Because while the Ossiarch Bonereapers are loyal servants of Nagash, they don't necessarily get along with the other undead. Take the Nighthaunt. On the surface, both factions serve Nagash. But the Bonereapers regard Nighthaunts as unstable, emotional wrecks. Nighthaunts are souls consumed by anguish and vengeance, shrieking specters driven by raw emotion. Bonereapers, meanwhile, are cold and rational, loyal to Nagash's will, and incapable of rage or sorrow. So when they fight alongside Nighthaunts, Bonereapers often find themselves silently judging their ghostly allies for being messy, irrational, and frankly embarrassing. Then there's the Flesh-Eater Courts. Oh boy. The Flesh-Eater Courts are arguably the single most frustrating allies a Bonereaper could have. Because from the Bonereaper's point of view, Flesh-Eaters are utterly insane. These are ghouls who believe they're noble knights, feasting on corpses while thinking they're dining in gilded halls. Imagine trying to coordinate a battlefield strategy with an abhorrent ghoul king who insists he's the Duke of Glorious Gallantry and wants to ride his imaginary steed into battle against a mortal city. If you're a Bonereaper, that's your reality. So even among Nagash's loyal servants, you'd find yourself surrounded by allies who either shriek uncontrollably, believe they're attending a royal banquet, or randomly drift through walls wailing about betrayal. And if you wake up as a Bonereaper, you'd quickly decide that working alone is probably the least annoying option. Because ultimately, for the Ossiarch Bonereapers, it's not just about bones, souls, or conquest. It's about creating a world where everything makes sense, where order reigns, and where chaos can no longer shatter existence. It's just too bad that to achieve that vision, you'd have to become the embodiment of fear for every living creature in the mortal realms. And that, my friend, is yet another reason why it would absolutely suck to wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper. So you've woken up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper. You've accepted that your body is a patchwork of other people's bones, that your job is to demand skull payments from terrified mortals, and that the entire mortal realms basically wants you obliterated. But let's say you're still holding out hope that maybe you'll at least get to be famous. That maybe, if you serve Nagash well enough, you could become one of the great legends etched into the necropolis walls. Well, maybe. But let's talk about what fame actually looks like among the Ossiarch Bonereapers. Because here's the brutal truth. Even if you're the greatest warrior Nagash ever sculpted from ivory and spirit essence, your legacy won't be statues or songs sung by grateful mortals. It'll be your bones being recycled into a fancy new fortress wall, or possibly a giant siege construct shaped like a monstrous skull. Still, there are Bonereapers who stand out from the rest. Titans among the legions, whose names echo like hollow bells through the endless vaults of Nagash's empire. Let's start with the big one, Katakros, Mortarch of the Necropolis. If you wake up as a Bonereaper, Katakros is the name that both inspires and terrifies you. He's not just a leader, he's the perfect general. Every inch of him is sculpted for war. His armor is more ornate than a cathedral, his weaponry sharper than mortal minds can comprehend. And his mind, oh, his mind. Catacross possesses the strategic genius of countless mortal generals whose spirits were bound into his essence. He calculates entire campaigns the way mortals calculate grocery lists. A single flicker of his bone-plated fingers can send entire phalanxes pivoting into new formations, cutting off enemy retreats, crushing rebellions before they even spark. And while Catacross might look silent and cold, he is absolutely capable of speaking. And when he does, his words cut sharper than any netherite blade. He's a master of rhetoric, capable of berating a subordinate so thoroughly that they probably prefer being dismantled on the spot rather than endure another minute of his icy sarcasm. Picture standing in front of Catacross, trying to explain why your detachment came back one femur short of quota. His empty eye sockets narrow ever so slightly, and in a voice like polished marble scraping over granite, he says, "Explain to me how, in all your cumulative centuries of existence, you failed to count bones properly. If you're lucky, he'll just reassign you. If you're unlucky, well, there's always a need for new stairs in the necropolis. Then there's Xantos, known as the Grave of Heroes. Where Catacross is the brilliant tactician, Xantos is the executioner. He's been shaped from the souls of conquerors, tyrants, and warlords, all bound together in a single towering figure of wrathful precision. His entire existence is focused on breaking the enemy's spirit and making sure Nagash's laws are enforced with lethal finality. Xantos rides a monstrous steed of bone and terror, wielding a long spear that crackles with necromantic energy. When he charges into battle, entire regiments collapse under the weight of pure dread. If you woke up as Xantos, you'd be the living embodiment of Nagash's retribution. You'd feel every enemy's fear radiating off them like heat, and you'd know, deep in your skull, that your name alone inspires mortal rulers to surrender rather than face the grave of heroes. Which sounds impressive until you realize that Xantos rarely speaks, doesn't know how to laugh, and basically spends every waking moment plotting how best to crush mortal resistance under hoof and spear. Not exactly the life of the party. Then we have Arkhan the Black. Technically, Arkhan's not an Ossiarch Bonereaper, but he's too important to leave out. He's Nagash's oldest lieutenant, the first of the Mortarchs, and a master necromancer so ancient that he remembers when Sigmar still swung hammers instead of bureaucratic decrees. Arkhan's presence looms over the Bonereapers like a ghost. He's the one who oversees many of the grand rituals that fuel Ossiarch society. His magic stitches new Bonereapers together, raises bone fortresses from the earth, and ensures the delicate soul bindings remain stable. But Arkhan is also a reminder of something that probably doesn't make you feel great as a Bonereaper, that even the most loyal servants of Nagash are disposable. Because no matter how powerful Arkhan becomes, he's still just another tool in Nagash's cosmic toolbox, a status that terrifies even someone as cold and calculating as the Leash King. Then there are the lesser-known legends, the Shield Captains, Mortisan High Priests and Kavalos Lords whose names echo through the marble halls of the necropolises. Each has their own tale, heroic last stands, impossible victories, or feats of engineering brilliance that reshaped entire warfronts. Like the Shield Captain who held off a Stormcast strike force for 7 straight days, his phalanx-shifting formation so perfectly that the Stormcast could never break through. Or the Mortisan who crafted a single massive bone bridge overnight to ferry an entire army across a boiling river of soulfire. These figures become myth within Bonereaper ranks. Their deeds are recorded not in songs, but in precise hieroglyphic inscriptions on the walls of bone libraries. And if you're a Bonereaper, those records are both inspiration and a constant reminder of the standards you're expected to meet. Because, let's face it, Bonereaper society is not known for handing out participation trophies. And while we're talking about the figures who rise above the rank and file, it's worth remembering that even fame doesn't guarantee survival. Nagash is pragmatic. If a famous Bonereaper falls in battle, Nagash doesn't weep. He simply instructs the Mortisans to recycle the bones into new constructs or to reinforce the walls of a necropolis. So you might spend centuries building a legacy, only to become a decorative archway the moment you slip up. Which brings us to what your daily life would actually look like if you woke up as a Bonereaper. Because while all this legendary stuff sounds impressive, 99% of your existence would be far more mundane. Your daily routine would begin before mortals even considered dawn had arrived. Bonereapers don't sleep in the mortal sense. Instead, they enter periods of low energy stasis, standing motionless while their necromantic energies recalibrate. Your consciousness never fully shuts off. You're always dimly aware, your thoughts drifting through fragments of the past lives trapped within your bones. When your eyes ignite back into full awareness, your duties begin immediately. First comes maintenance. You'd report to a mortisan for inspection. They'd scrutinize every etched rune on your bones, ensure your soul bindings remain stable, and possibly file off any calcium buildup that might impede your movements. If they discover even the smallest flaw, a tiny crack in your shin, a slight energy imbalance in your ribcage, they'll decide whether you require repairs, adjustments, or complete disassembly. After your inspection, it's time for drills. Bonereapers spend hours every day drilling battlefield formations. You'd march in phalanx formations, perfecting turns, thrusts, shield walls, and tactical withdrawals. Your commanders would bark precise instructions in harsh, echoing voices, expecting instantaneous compliance. And it's not just physical drills. Bonereapers practice mental exercises too. You'd stand in silent rows while mortisans recite battle scenarios, expecting you to calculate casualty projections, logistical needs, and the ideal deployment of your forces. Imagine standing there while one of your commanders asks, if enemy cavalry charges your flank, which angle do you pivot, and how many skulls can be harvested from the first wave? And you'd have to answer immediately, citing the correct bone harvest ratios. But beyond training, your days would also be filled with pure logistics. Bonereapers spend enormous amounts of time accounting for resources. You'd help record the weight and quality of harvested bones, tally the quantity of soul energy stored in necromantic batteries, and draft ledgers detailing future tithe demands for mortal settlements. It's like working in a finance department, except the spreadsheets are made of bone parchment, and the numbers represent people you might have to slaughter for overdue payments. Occasionally, you'd be dispatched to oversee the construction of new necropolises. Imagine rows of Bonereapers carrying enormous femurs, stacking skulls into walls, and carving elaborate reliefs into ribcages destined to become doorways. The mortisans supervise every detail, ensuring perfect symmetry and structural integrity. Your duties might also include standing watch atop necropolis walls, scanning the horizon for enemy armies or rogue bands of chaos marauders. You'd spend hours gazing out across barren landscapes, your mind half focused on the present, half lost in fragments of lives that no longer belong to you. But above all, your day would be ruled by discipline and silence. Bonereapers rarely speak unless necessary. There are no casual conversations, no jokes, no moments of camaraderie. You'd exist in a constant state of vigilance, always ready to march, fight, or tally bones at a moment's notice. And even when you're not on active duty, there's no such thing as free time. Any moment not spent in drills, maintenance, or warfare is devoted to meditative contemplation of Nagash's doctrines. Bonereapers chant silent mantras, reflecting on the nature of order and the inevitability of death. Because for the Ossiarch Bonereapers, every aspect of existence serves a purpose in Nagash's grand design. There is no art for art's sake, no leisure, no creativity beyond what is strictly necessary for function and intimidation. So if you wake up as a Bonereaper, prepare for an existence that's half grim bureaucracy, half relentless warfare, and entirely devoid of joy. And that, my friend, is why it would absolutely suck to wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper. So let's say you've somehow survived the countless bone inspections, the never-ending bone tallies, and the crushing existential dread that comes with having a skull face and a mind stuffed full of other people's memories. You've proven yourself as a loyal piece of Nagash's perfect machine, maybe even risen a little higher in the ranks. Congratulations. Now you get to experience what passes for daily life as an Ossiarch Bonereaper. And let me tell you, daily life is not exactly the phrase most mortals would choose for what goes on inside Nagash's empire. See, if you're hoping for a quiet evening spent relaxing by candlelight in your bone chamber, maybe humming to yourself while you polish your skull helm, think again. Because life as a Bonereaper is a relentless cycle of tasks, rituals, and drills, all orchestrated to keep Nagash's empire running with perfect, merciless efficiency. Let's start with mornings. Though to be fair, the concept of morning is pretty loose in the necropolis, since the skies above Ossiarch strongholds are often darkened by swirling death magic, casting everything into a perpetual twilight. Instead, your day begins when a mortisan signals the end of your stasis cycle. You emerge from your motionless vigil, runes glowing faintly across your ivory armor as necromantic energies spark back to full power. Your first duty is usually a personal inspection. Mortisans move down orderly lines of Bonereapers, tapping each warrior's joints, peering into their hollow eye sockets, tracing every rune with obsidian wands to detect even the smallest fluctuations in soul resonance. If you pass inspection, you're allowed to proceed to your assigned tasks. If not, well, let's just say that Mortisans are never shy about dismantling a faulty construct to harvest useful parts for something new. Next come the drills. Every Bonereaper must remain in peak fighting condition. You'd find yourself marching in synchronized formations across bone-paved courtyards, practicing shield interlocks, spear thrusts, and rotating phalanx maneuvers. It's not just physical either. Your instructors will bombard you with simulated battle scenarios, demanding rapid calculations of enemy numbers, casualty estimates, and the optimal way to harvest bones from fallen foes. Sometimes the drills even include simulated negotiations with mortals. A Mortisan might play the role of a terrified mayor pleading for mercy, and you'd be expected to recite the exact bone-tithe demands, unwavering and utterly polite, even as your hypothetical victims beg for their lives. And that's before you even get to breakfast, which, by the way, you don't really have. Bonereapers don't need food in the traditional sense. Instead, you receive periodic infusions of necromantic energy, administered via obsidian rods that channel pure soul essence into your runic core. The process is efficient, but deeply unpleasant. Imagine feeling thousands of screaming voices rushing through your consciousness, even if only for a moment, before they're absorbed and silenced by your own binding runes. After that, your day might involve a variety of duties. Perhaps you're assigned to oversee the construction of new necropolis fortifications. You'd join columns of Bonereapers carrying enormous slabs of sculpted bone, carefully fitting skulls into architectural niches and carving necromantic sigils into the walls. Or maybe you're dispatched to conduct a bone-tithe audit in a nearby mortal settlement. You'd stand in the town square, skull helm glinting under pale light, calmly reciting quotas while mortals tremble and weep. Or, if you're especially trusted, you might be sent on diplomatic missions to negotiate with mortals, or with other factions of death. Though in Bonereaper terms, negotiation generally boils down to hand over your bones or we'll harvest them ourselves. When you're not working, you might be assigned to guard duty. That means standing perfectly still on high necropolis walls, your eyes scanning endless horizons for signs of chaos incursions, Sylvaneth ambushes, or mortal armies daring enough to resist the bone-tithe. And through it all, there's silence. Bonereapers rarely speak unless necessary. The halls of the necropolises echo with the scrape of bone on stone, the faint thrum of necromantic energy, and the occasional distant chanting of Mortisans performing soul-binding rituals. There's no laughter, no casual conversation, no music beyond the hollow, haunting notes of bone flutes played during certain rituals, because joy simply doesn't exist in the Ossiarch Empire. Instead, your moments of leisure are filled with silent meditation. You'd kneel in rows alongside your fellow Bonereapers, focusing your mind on Nagash's doctrines, purging unwanted mortal memories, and reaffirming your place in the grand design. But no matter how diligently you meditate, those memories always return. Tiny flickers of mortal life that slip through the necromantic bindings. Ha! The feel of warm rain on skin. The laughter of children. The softness of a lover's touch. And just for an instant, you remember what it was like to be alive. Then the runes blaze, and those memories are crushed beneath the cold certainty of your programming. Because Nagash's empire doesn't tolerate weakness, Which brings us to the most soul-crushing part of waking up as a Bonereaper, the sheer psychological toll of eternal existence. See, immortality sounds great right up until you realize it means enduring the same endless cycle of tasks, wars, and rituals forever. Bonereapers possess perfect memory. You'd recall every battle you've ever fought, every mortal you've ever slaughtered, every single bone you've catalogued. You'd remember the precise weight of every skull you ever harvested. And worse, you'd remember the faces of every mortal who looked at you with terror as you recited the bone tithe. Because while your programming suppresses guilt, it doesn't erase memories. Those mortal eyes linger in your mind. Those screams echo in your hollow skull. And sometimes, in the stillness of the necropolis night, you'd find yourself staring out into the gloom, asking questions you're not supposed to ask. Is Nagash truly building a perfect empire? Are we really bringing order or just endless suffering? Who was I before I became a Bonereaper? But here's the cruelest part. Even if you dare to think those thoughts, your programming ensures that you'll never act on them. Doubt is crushed the instant it surfaces. The bindings tighten like chains, forcing you back into loyal servitude. You exist in a perpetual limbo, aware enough to understand how monstrous your duties are, yet utterly incapable of refusing them. And that, perhaps more than anything else, is why waking up as a Bonereaper would be the ultimate cosmic punishment. Because you'd be a creature built for perfect obedience, cursed to spend eternity as the enforcer of a regime that values bones more than life. Your days would be measured not in sunsets or seasons, but in quotas of femurs and skulls. Your victories would be counted not in freedom or glory, but in the weight of bones stacked high in the ossifactorum. And your reward for flawless service, to keep doing it, forever. Which brings us, finally, to the end of our journey through Nagash's bone-clad empire. So, why would it suck to wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper? Because you'd be trapped in a body stitched together from strangers' remains, driven by stolen memories, and forced to spend eternity counting bones, collecting tithes, and slaughtering mortals, all in service of a cosmic overlord whose idea of utopia is a silent world ruled by the dead. Because you'd carry an empire on your shoulders, and know that if you ever falter, your bones will be recycled into the next monument to Nagash's vanity. Because even though you're technically immortal, you'd never truly live again. And that, my friend, is why it would absolutely suck to wake up as an Ossiarch Bonereaper. Thanks for joining me on this grim and bony odyssey through the hidden lore of the mortal realms. If you enjoyed this deep dive, and if you want more Age of Sigmar lore delivered with a dash of dry humor and a soft spot for pugs, feel free to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for realm lore mops. And hey, let us know in the comments what hobby projects you've got on the table right now. Whether it's a Mortek Guard Phalanx, a Gothizar Harvester centerpiece, or some bright pink gits, we'd love to hear about it. Until next time, remember, in the mortal realms there's always something worse than death, and sometimes it's undeath.